Now, playing in the event and really taking a thought of the overall, what going to time, right? We was a big factor. We spoke
For me, it
about
was
it.
a big. For me, it was a big factor.
For you, it was definitely a big factor. But I think, like in general, there's a lot of games that went to time. And what are your feelings after playing an 8-round tournament, going to time? I think in 3 of them. What are your current feelings about the end of time procedure in the game?
So before we even get to the end of time procedure, I will tell you that I'm no longer playing Mr. Nice Guy at any more of these events. So like
Okay.
at this point, I'm not just letting people take 2-3 minute turns. Um, so uh, we're past that point. I'm also no longer allowing people to not tap their ink or exert their ink when they're doing things, not like keep track of their ink on the side or do it like other games do it. I don't care. Like play the game the way it's supposed to be played, and we won't have confusion, and we won't spend time recounting everything that's going on. But anyway, end of time. So first of all, I don't think 50 minutes is enough time for a best of 3.
Okay.
So when I was playing in Maryland, was it last week? I don't know. The weeks are
It
so
was the
long.
week before Miami, so yeah.
Yeah, so long ago. Feels like it was so long
Feels
ago.
like it was long ago.
We did 55-minute rounds,
Oh, okay.
and I don't think I went to time once. So, in my opinion, I don't think 50-minute rounds are long enough, especially when you're dealing with this again, a new community, and that'll always happen with I don't think the community will be mature for a while, even though a lot of players are coming from other games. So in my opinion, I would do like 55-minute to 60-minute rounds, but I think
So,
55 is probably fine.
is there any world where you would rather go to a best of 1?
No.
Okay. Don't even spend any time on it. Just move. Go forward.
No. I don't like best of 1s unless you do Swiss plus 2, and I don't trust that most people would actually do Swiss plus 2, so I don't trust it. But the 50-minute five turns is not long enough. I would do 55 minutes. But even assuming the world where that doesn't happen, I just don't think that too many people are able to just play for a draw. And in a tournament the size that we had it, a draw was basically a loss a lot of times, depending on when that draw came, what your record was at the time. I mean, I finished 5-1-2 with 2 draws, which was pretty much like the second draw eliminated me from. I mean, I not technically, like I could have been 5-0-3 or whatever, like and made it in, but like once I had a loss and 2 draws, I was already eliminated from top 16.
Right.
Which didn't happen until the second to last round, but whatever. In terms of like, do I think we should go to like lore counts at the end? I don't know. I can see the positives and negatives of that as well. I think control decks would have a serious hard time even showing up to an event if you went with lore counts at the end. Pure control decks would just automatically lose in time. Now, are they automatically trying to draw in time? Yes. But
you're taking all my counter arguments away.
I can see both arguments, but I don't like. I can understand the argument of like not just going with pure lore, but when the 5 turns are over and it's just automatically a draw, it just allows you to basically like play for that draw if you're behind, not playing for your opponent to not win as opposed to you also trying to win. But certain decks do that anyway, so I don't think it's that big of a deal. Like I didn't see anyone like really making any plays that would have altered the way they were playing because they were playing for that. In my opinion, when I played it, I don't think I saw anybody like taking unorthodox lines.
I said it on stream all day. Players were absolutely playing for this.
I mean, I will
and
say
they had to. The point is that
you're 5 minutes to go, they could slow down their pace. I'll give you that.
Absolutely.
That I'll give you. But not in the extra turns. Like
in the extra turns, there's no reason to drag out your turns.
Right.
But the point is, in the extra turns, you can absolutely just play defense to not lose.
Sure. But I mean, I didn't see anyone doing that at like, oh, we have 15 minutes to go and we're in game 1. I'm going to play defense the rest of this game, drag it out as long as possible. if that happened to people and one of my losses was 1-0, for example, I don't think my opponent was dragging it out. It could have been my own fault for not conceding a player.
Mhm. Oh yeah,
Um,
sure.
so I don't think you can just go with lore at the end because I just think the control decks would be unplayable at that point. And so I don't know because as it stands right now with 50-minute rounds, the game still being new, so many games just automatically go to time like to extra turns anyway. A lot of them do get done in those turns, but I just think that's too much of an advantage for the decks that are non-control aspects.
Now, most of the games I was commentating, I couldn't really look around the room to see exactly where we were. There were several times where the last game being played was the stream match.
Yeah, ironically.
How often you're like on average, how many tables do you think we're going to time?
Not many. Not many where I was sitting. I can tell you that much.
Sure.
I don't know about the lower tables, but not that many. Not as many as I would have thought.
Okay, fair enough.
Like I would say like maybe low double digits, like
Okay.
10 the most.
Yeah, I don't know. I don't. It's not that I don't like draws or ties or anything like that. I just think unintentional draws create really shitty moments for players. And to go off of the concept of we have a bunch of new players, we have a bunch of inexperienced players, it's a newer game. There's not like that. I'm trying to think of like the correct wording for it to make it sound right, but it's like there's not the camaraderie of understanding that you can't win. And when you can't win, knowing that you're going to go to a draw, and if you can see that your opponent is supposed to win, you should concede.
No.
I'm just saying this is where I'm at. Because, like, let's just say if we played our 5 turns, but it's very clear that the next turn my opponent's going to win the game. Like, that draw is killing both of you or anyway. So, like, if you can't win the game anyway, there is some level of sportsmanship in my world where I'm like, I'm going to lose. If we both draw, we're both going to screw ourselves anyway. So, like, I may as well just give my opponent the win. I don't know. That's why I hate the draw situation. I hate
Brian Westbrook largely disagrees with that, going down at the 1 yard line. So I totally disagree with that in all aspects.
It's just, but that's the problem here. The problem is that since there is no clear winner, this is never going to happen anyway. And the bigger problem is that since there is no clear winner, then there's always a position for players to not play to win. And that is the worst part of anything. You should always be playing to win the game, and the rules currently are telling you to do otherwise. And that's shitty. It's shitty as a commentator because I literally just have to sit there and say, well, he can't win the game, but he can sure as hell do everything possible to make sure his opponent can't win the game. So he's going to make some really awkward looking plays for the next 3 turns just so his opponent can't get the 20 lore. That's a shitty thing to commentate on. Like, there's nothing to be said here. It's just like the strategy is don't die. And it doesn't matter if you can win because you're just going to draw. It's not a fun game experience. It's just not. It was really shitty to see it often all day long. I mean, the worst of it was round 1 where we had a 64-minute game 1 of a Ruby Amethyst Mirror. And legitimately neither player could win the game in 64 minutes. And the last, like, 8 turns of the game were just making sure the other player couldn't win the game. Because both of them knew that, well, I can't win, but I can make sure my opponent can't lose. So that means they wasted everyone's time for nearly 70 minutes to a 0-0 draw. It's terrible. I'm not going to move past it. I think it's shitty. I think there should absolutely be a punishment to control decks. If you can't win a game in 30 minutes, then, oh well, like change your deck, modify your deck to work within the time restraints of the game. But modifying your deck to just play 50-minute game 1s, it's not fun for anybody.
I mean, that's up to your opponent.
Fun?
That's up to your opponent to concede. I still think 55-minute rounds would fix this.
I mean, I just told you there was a 65-minute game 1 in a Ruby Amethyst Mirror. Now, granted, I'll tell you that Spellbook changes all this. I'll tell you that Merlin fixes all this because now you're just going to have natural lore gains throughout, and maybe that's the difference. Maybe the problem is, in all honesty, the card pool, producing the decks that it is. And that's why you see cards like we already see in chapter 2 just naturally giving you lore. And maybe it's just a problem in the chapter 1 metagame. Time will tell. But
wait a minute, let me ask you this. How do you justify in the untimed rounds that none of the rounds went more than like an hour? Because those players knew what they were doing.
I
knew how to play the game.
I can justify it
acceptable
because
pace.
the top 16 players were arguably the best players in the room.
So then what's the issue here?
Well, the issue is that, again, we go to if you give them 5 minutes, they'll ask for 10.
Right. Totally.
So if you just change the rules to where you don't have like unintentional draws, then you also remove all these problems anyway. And you force players to play in a different attitude with their own decks rather than playing the game they're going to play anyway.
To me, it's about the players. I'm hating the players, not the game.
That's fine. That's fine. But I also know that we're living in we're living right now in a rule book that is absolutely not written.
Right. I agree.
So like, this is my opinion that like, if for whoever might be listening to take a second. Now you offered 5 minutes. I'm always going to say that the more you put more time on the clock, the more that players are just going to continuously ask for more. And that's where it's a problem. Every other game in existence that we've had this conversation offline, they're all 50-minute rounds. So like, why are we trying to go to 55 just because the player base is new? No, that's wrong. The player base needs to get up to speed and play the game at its set pace. So the real issue here is unintentional draws are creating worse moments in the higher pressure points of the game. Whereas if each player had to play a strategic way to win the game and actually create space and moments rather than I just can't lose, then you actually have a different mindset altogether. It's very easy to not lose. It's very hard to play to win. Nonetheless, that's just my tidbit. One of the most aggravating things all day was commentating on games that went to a draw because I literally, you're watching it on your screen just saying the only thing this player is doing right now is doing everything as possible to just not let his opponent get 20 and win the game. And it's not fun. It's just not.
I mean, that's how you win, right? You win by getting the 20 lore, not by getting more lore than your opponent.
I hear you, but when the game is on the line, it's just like, oh, you got the 19, doesn't count. I'm at 0. You're at 19, doesn't count. That's shitty. I'm sorry. I'm not going to agree with that. I'm just not.
I've seen people come back from 19. Like I saw it in the game multiple times.
Great, but if you have to do that in 6 turns and you can't, then you should lose. I'm sorry, you should. Like I'd much rather see games end that way than end in I had actually no chance of winning this game for another 35 minutes, but because of that we went to a draw. That's your deck choice. You can build your deck differently to win a game if that was the option.
I had a draw with Amber Steel. It wasn't just Ruby Amethyst.
I hear you. And I mean we saw in top 4 that there was like a 25-minute game 1 in an Amber Steel mirror. It can happen, but it still is what it is. Just I don't know where I'm at.